Hi, everyone. This is the July 2025 edition of WalkMass Network. I'm going to have Rachel start us off.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. I think Pete is going to share the slides that we have, and I think Pete will start us off.
Can folks see that?
Yes, now we can.
Okay, cool. Um, as I said, I'm Pete Wilson from T for Mass, Senior Policy Director. I've been in T for Mass for about 5 years now. And Brendan had asked us to come and talk about um, the legislature a little bit and demystifying some of the processes up there. Marty, I think this will be a little bit remedial for you, if you will. But we just to give an overview of today's agenda, just we've already done welcomes and introductions. Let's talk a little bit about what transportation for mass is and what we do. Talk a little bit about the legislature, the budget, some of the transit funding and how that works, and the legislative process and some priority bills that we are working on. And obviously, we're open to a discussion about other bills that are not on our short list that we have on this presentation. And then Rachel's going to talk a little bit about um, how to engage with your legislator or elected officials. I think it's kind of applicable for both the local, state, and federal level, depending on what your issue is. And then we're happy to take any questions. So just a little bit about T for Mass. We've been around since roughly 2009, but we're a statewide coalition of community-based organizations, transportation advocacy groups, and others who are dedicated to creating just and equitable transportation so that every community can flourish. We advocate mostly at the state level. I would say it's probably 90-10 as far as the splits when it comes to like our focus on transportation, um, being state to federal. So we advocate for better transportation options, access, and funding to try to reverse policies of the past that have disproportionately hurt low income and black and brown communities. That also includes roadway safety, obviously. It's not just access to, you know, transit or driving, it's walkability, it's micromobility and things like that. So we're made up of 28 member organizations. We used to have a lot more, but we have restructured in the past few years. And instead of being solely focused on transportation, we have members that have focus areas of housing, climate, public health, food access, and other social justice concerns, all intersecting with transportation. What we've come to find out, and this is should be no shocker, is when we talk to groups who have a different focus, the through line is transportation, right? Whether it's access to food, whether it's access to healthcare, education, etc. What comes up time and time again is one of the barriers of people living their best lives is access to reliable transportation, whether it's a car, living in a safe area to walk or bike, or having access to transit. It's across the state. We've been, from Amherst to P Town, and we commonly hear the same threats. We have a participatory process for how we set our policy priorities as a coalition. We try to get feedback from our members about what they're working on. T for Mass is roughly 6 staff members, so we can't come up with all of the ideas. We don't know what's happening in every community, so we rely on our members to hear what they're working on and what's important to them. We have some fact sheets about our priority bills on our website. And then, working together as a coalition is, sharing a story about something that's impacted your community when you speak with your legislatures. We try to make connections between concerns and show up in larger numbers so the impact can be greater. And it's also about building relationships and building trust, and showing up and making change together. I think what we've come to find out as a statewide coalition, we've been seen in the past as basically focused on Eastern Massachusetts and particularly transit. You hear a lot of similar stories out of communities across the Commonwealth, whether it's in the hill towns or Lawrence or on the South Coast. And we're trying to make those connections for different orgs to work on things together. I'm going to talk a little bit about the legislature, what it's consisted of, how it's made up. It's a body of 160 elected officials, or 200 elected officials. So there's 160 members of the House and 40 members of the Senate. Each district is about 40,000 residents for House members, and each Senate district is about 160,000 residents. So you kind of do the math. Those numbers may have changed. They may have gone up in the past few years on the census. And all members serve 2-year terms and have to run for re-election if they choose to, every other November. So this year is not an election year. The election years are even years. So next year will be the, I guess, biannual statewide elections for the legislature. The House is led by the Speaker of the House, and the Senate President is the leader of the Senate. They are both elected by the members of each body at the beginning of each 2-year legislative session in January. So the members elect the Speaker and the Senate President in the beginning of the odd year of the term, which would have been January of this year. And we have this on our website as well. It's just a timeline of sort of how the biannual cycle works. Roughly, they've changed the rules a little bit, but this is still applicable. The legislature starts meeting in January of the first year and ends, the session ends December 31, or actually the day before the next session begins. So it's roughly 2 years almost to the date. But formal sessions more or less end on July 31st of the second year. And a formal session is when the majority of the members come together and take recorded votes on legislation that could be seen as controversial, but are bigger legislative bills rather than local bills or home rule petitions and things like that. An informal session, which they have twice a week, is usually attended by a handful of members, and they mostly deal with local issues and other non-controversial or wide-ranging impactful legislation. So what happens in the first year is the governor starts the budget process usually in January and releases her budget proposal. The House takes that proposal and looks at it and examines it and internally, and then in April releases their own version of the budget, which in the first year is known as House 1, and then it's assigned a bill number. And the House debates their budget at the end of April, usually, where they add amendments and usually some more spending and maybe some policy proposals. And then they send it over to the Senate. The Senate does their process and in May. And by the end of May, you have 2 competing versions of the budget, the House version and the Senate version, and then they send that to a 6-member conference committee, which takes roughly, well, it can take as long as it takes, but the fiscal year starts July 1st. So ideally, you have a conference budget, which is a negotiated budget that resolves any of the differences between the House and Senate versions, sent to the governor for her signature. The governor has 10 days to sign or veto or send back amendments to the budget. And the legislature can then take up those vetoes, usually till the end of the current calendar year. And it requires a 2/3 vote to override any of the governor's vetoes. Throughout all of this time, committees are meeting, they're having hearings on non-budgetary legislation and reporting bills out. And the legislature itself is also voting on other legislation that they will send to the governor for signature. That continues through the end. And then next year, the same thing happens over and over again. from January to July, and usually they break for recess July 31st, and don't have any formal sessions after July 31st. However, that has changed this year. I think they changed the rules so they can come back to take up conference committee reports on legislation and potentially supplemental budgets and override any of the governor's vetoes. It's kind of inside baseball-y, but that's more or less how the legislature's timeline works and how the budget processes work in each chamber. So the budget process, as I just talked about, the legislature under the Constitution must pass an annual balanced budget. The fiscal year begins July 1st to June 30th of next year. And each spring, the legislature spends putting together the budget. And as I said, she gets 10 days to veto or sign the budget as she sees fit. This is that process in a graphic form. This is from Mass Budget. It's on their website. They also have a very detailed description of, the state budget 101, and it goes into a little bit more technical detail about amendments and other things like that. But this is more or less the timeline. This year was the first year that the governor had received the budget, I believe, before July 1st since 2016. And when I was a house staffer, a lowly house staffer 15, 17 years ago, we sent 2 budgets that were signed before July 1st. When the budget goes late, they usually pass a supplemental budget to keep the government funded. It's not like, we're going to shut down state government because we don't have actual funding for programs and initiatives and services. But it doesn't necessarily look good when your budget goes late year after year after year, because the bonding agencies kind of look at that with a discerning eye. In particular, we focus a lot on transit funding. So I just want to throw this out, how the MBTA and RTAs are funded. Transportation funding in the state budget is not necessarily the most transparent way to do things. There's a lot of just transfers to either MassDOT or the Commonwealth Transportation Fund or federal formula funds. So it's a little you have to dig into the weeds a little bit, but overall the MBTA and the 15 regional transit authorities are funded by a combination of federal formula funds that comes from the 5-year surface transportation authorization bill that Congress passes every 5 years or so. This was the most recent one was the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So that consists of federal formula funds that are determined through the formulas that the feds have. It's based on population and transit service. And those funds go down directly to the transit agencies through the state. And those are kind of set and aren't touched in a way that is annually funded or determine exactly how they must spend those dollars. Local municipal assessments, if you have transit service in your municipality, your local state government or local taxes and budget for the municipality has an assessment to pay for a portion of transit service, whether it's an RTA or MBTA. Fares, which, obviously if you ride, you pay a fare. Although this year's budget contained a provision that RTAs are no longer allowed to charge fares. So all the RTAs will be fare free from moving forward, with the state actually supplementing the loss of revenue for that. And state contract assistance. This is direct appropriations to either the MBTA or the RTAs by the legislature on an annual basis. The big difference between the MBTA and RTA funding is the MBTA has a dedicated funding source, unlike the RTAs, and is funded by, and that source is a percentage of the sales tax every year. So anytime you purchase something anywhere in the Commonwealth, a portion of the tax that you're paying is going to fund the MBTA. It's been around for 20 plus years. This formula of funding, and there is a running commentary narrative that folks in other parts of the state who never use the MBTA have to pay for it. And my argument against that is that there's a lot of things that we pay for that we don't use, but that's what's part of being in a civil society is all about. But I get it. So moving on to the legislative process, which is a little bit more convoluted than the budget process. At the beginning of each 2-year session, legislators file bills to be debated and voted on by the legislature. Usually the filing period is from when they are sworn in early January to like mid to late January, like the third week of January, during which about 5,000 to 7,000 bills get filed. Not all of them get passed, let's be clear. So a lot of them are refiled or local issues or liquor licenses or things like that. Each bill is assigned to the committee of jurisdiction, and each bill must have a public hearing. Committees vote on each bill to proceed or not, and then are voted on by either the House or the Senate. If a bill receives enough votes in both chambers to pass, it is sent to the governor for her signature or veto. The one difference that has come across with the new rules that they have, committees now, if it's a House bill, they have 60 days to take action on the bill in committee after the hearing. If it's a Senate bill, there is no deadline, but House members of the joint committees, of which we have joint committees, we're one of 3 states that do, can vote on House specific bills, and Senate members can vote on Senate specific bills to vote them out of committee, which is a change from the past. And there is a reporting deadline where all bills must be reported out of the majority of the committees by, I believe it's December 3rd this year. In past years, it was the first Wednesday in February. I believe when Marty was there, it was like March 17th. It was like the third Wednesday in March of the second year. So it is getting earlier and earlier of when bills must be reported out. What I've seen in just this session is that there seems to be a lot more hearings going on more quickly, which is a good sign, but it also we'll see what happens next year as far as like what the process is and does this make change for moving more bills more quickly. And then finally, these are just some of our priority bills taken from a list. I won't go into all of them now, but we have sort of a mixed bag of, when it comes to equity, ending debt-based driving restrictions. Currently, if you're behind on tolls or other non-criminal or non-safety related infractions when it comes to transportation, there is no way to pay pay those charges back except for one bulk payment, and a lot of people are getting into trouble. And what happens is if you're late and you don't make those payments, they take away your driver's license, which doesn't make any sense. So we're working to not necessarily remove that practice, removing the practice of taking away the license, yes, but also allowing people to do a payment plan, file a hardship waiver, which is already done for folks who get like DUIs and things like that. Reducing VMT, it's something that is important to meeting our climate goals and increasing safety on our roadways. RBIs is a way for local cities and towns to raise local revenue for transportation. And then a couple things on microtransit and congestion pricing, which are 2 things that we also support. So I know that was a lot, but I'm going to turn it over to Rachel, and she can talk about what it means to like talk to your legislature and how to move these things into action.
Great. Thanks, Pete. So For some of you, this may be, stuff you already know, things you're already doing, but for others, this may be new. So just wanted to go through a little bit about, what we can do as individuals, as people involved in coalitions, as people involved in our communities, people that, just care about different things, whether it's, road safety or other concerns in your community. So each resident has both a state representative and a state senator who represents them in the state legislature. There's a really easy tool that you can use to find who those people are. And on the next slide in a moment, I'll show you kind of what that looks like. But you can, call or email them directly to ask them to support or oppose bills. So if there's something that's concerning to you, it can be a simple call or email. It could also be, reaching out to them to just raise their awareness about something that's happening in your community that you're concerned about that they might not be aware of already. And you can reach out anytime, really. These people are there to represent you. But some key times to reach out that we wanted to flag. One is kind of at the very beginning of that 2-year session, before the bill filing deadline, which I think is the third Friday in January of the first year. So, that passes quite quickly, but in that very beginning time, if there are issues that you want your legislator to bring up, especially, or to file a bill on, that would be a time to reach out and speak with them then. After that bill filing deadline, it's still important to reach out about co-sponsoring bills, asking them to champion bills. As Pete said, there are a lot of bills that get filed, right? So a lot of times, your legislator might not even be aware of something has been filed. And so flagging different issues for them is important. Then in terms of the budget season, so Pete went over that timeline. Before those budgets get voted on, you can reach out and ask your legislator to support the inclusion of something in that budget, or if there's something that you is of interest in a proposal, letting them know, if you support or want to see something. And then, Pete spoke about that Joint Rule 10 day, which is that the first Wednesday in December of the first year, so December 3rd this year, that has been moved up. So again, pressure at that point is needed on the legislators that make up those committees, that, if the bill you care about is being considered in the Transportation Committee and you want to see that advanced, one way to do that or kind of advocate for that would be to ask your legislator to then talk to the people on that committee and so ask them to support that moving forward. And then, anytime, right, throughout the legislative session, as these public hearings are coming up, as Pete said, there's a window of, at least for House bills, of when bills need to be reported out after a hearing. And so, there are times even after the hearing, reaching out to your legislator to ask them to support or oppose something is always important. We've heard that, many legislators actually keep, tallies of the amount of calls or emails about either supporting or, especially co-sponsoring a bill. So, we want to kind of emphasize that it may seem like a small thing, it may seem like it doesn't really make an impact, but we know that it does. We know that legislators are paying attention to that. So that's a way you can get involved. P, if you want to go to the next slide. So this is just that find your legislator tool. So one side, the left side, is when you put in your address. So I just put in 50 Milk Street. So that's her office address. And then you'll find, who your state senator and state representative are. If you click on their name, then you'll find the screenshot on your right is kind of the information that you'll find. So that's how you find out their email, their phone number, office, the committees that they're on, their district, and bills that they've sponsored or co-sponsored. So looking for an email address, that's one way to find it. You want to go to the next slide, please? And so it can be really simple when you reach out. A lot of you have probably done this at some point, but if you haven't, it can be just a very simple email. You don't have to know a ton about the bill or what it does, doesn't do. Just, don't let that stop you. We really, as Pete mentioned in the beginning, kind of the importance of telling stories, right? And telling why this issue is important to you. And that can be really, really powerful. And really making sure you are writing to your legislators and stressing that you are a constituent. So you are in their district. This is what you care about. And just including your name, where you're writing from. Okay, next slide, please. So a couple other ways to get involved. You can write testimony on bills. So you can sign up to testify in person or virtually, or you can just submit, written testimony. In a minute, I'll show you kind of where to find the directions for that. You can write op-eds to raise public awareness of the issue that you're concerned about. This is a way to kind of educate other folks about the issue that others may not be aware of. So Brendan shared earlier in the chat about the Boston Globe article about the debt-based license suspension issue, right? So that there are ways that can bring the issue to greater awareness. And we have a legislative toolkit on our website that has some guidance on how to do these things. It kind of breaks it down. So hopefully can make it a little less intimidating. And we invite you always to connect with us. WalkMass, I'm sure would appreciate that too. And then on the next slide, I'll just show you briefly the one thing that has been helpful for me to learn. So I started at T4Mass maybe a year and a half ago. So I've learned a bunch, I've asked Pete a bunch of questions, I've asked other T4Mass and other allies a whole bunch of questions. One of the interesting things that I want to point out here is on the Mass legislature website. So the website's down at the bottom of this slide. That's kind of the homepage of where you can find a lot of this information. On that homepage, there is a calendar and of what's upcoming. There is a little link at the bottom right of that calendar where you can see more, and it'll show you everything that is scheduled. And then you can click on, if there's, a transportation committee hearing, you can click on that, and then you would see what is in this screenshot here. It will show you all of the bills that are going to be heard that day. It will link to the bill. So if you're wondering, what this thing with sometimes they have really strange titles. And so you can click on that and learn more who sponsored this bill, who's co-sponsoring it, what the text is. And then on the left side, you can see all the details about when the hearing's being held, where it's being held, if you want to testify, what you need to do, who to send testimony to, if you're submitting it. There's a few more instructions that kind of go down if you scroll on this page, but this is just kind of a screenshot. But it will give you, if there's a deadline for the testimony, it will give you that. So just a lot of information here that you can access. And so I think and Pete might have more to add on all of these kind of pieces about how to get involved. But yeah, so I'll pass it back to Pete if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I would just stress too that that members of the legislature are just people, right? Who are doing a job, right? They have home lives and family and things like that as well. I personally always feel like you get more um with honey than vinegar. So like yes, they are public officials and yes, you can criticize them. But I think it's an unrealistic expectation to be hyperly critical of the legislature and then go ask them to do more things for you, right? So I think it's important um, to be firm in your convictions, but also try to be nice, because I don't know, people have feelings, and if you're overly critical and unfair to someone, I don't think they're going to be motivated to help you in your cause. But at the same time, I think it's really important. And when I was a staffer, we definitely kept track of constituent calls and emails about certain things. You knew that, like, at least the people that I worked for knew it was important to show up to their constituents and things that were happening in their district. And it is a process, and it's a slow process. And I think to Rachel's point, it something that may be really, really important to you is also there's people out there who have that same thing that's really, really important to them. And if you're looking at, thousands of bills, it's also super important to highlight to members of the legislature, why this is important and to point it out to them, because sometimes they'll be like, oh yeah, I meant to we had this happen earlier this year. I meant to co-sponsor that. I forgot. Thanks for pointing it out to me. So yeah, it it is somewhat intimidating, but I think it's also, people understand, like, um, when you reach out that you're taking time out of your day to try to be heard. And I think it's important that they hear directly, because hearing directly from me as a person who works for an advocacy organization is not nearly as important as hearing directly from a constituent. Um, Marty, you could tell me I'm wrong, but I think that's mostly true.
For those who don't know, I'm a former state legislator, and I will 100% agree with everything that you just heard.
There you go. So, um, happy to answer any questions. If there's other bills that people want to bring to our attention that we should be focusing on, um, we have a long list of bills that our coalition members are also working on, because we can't take the lead on everything. Yeah, Betsy.
Well, before we
Or-
get to Betsy's question, can you just mention the fair share amendment and, like, what that is and like how that came into play and what
Sure.
that does?
Yeah, so in 2022, there was a ballot question that was statewide ballot question to charge an extra 4% tax on income over $1 million. So what does that mean? It means as soon as you hit $1 million, instead of paying 5% of your income tax and state income tax, the money over that $1 million threshold is taxed at 9%, right? It roughly impacted 14,000 households in Massachusetts and is currently on track for the fiscal year, I think the FY25 fiscal year, which just ended a few weeks ago, to raise roughly $3 billion. And that money must be spent on transportation or education. So it's tied to those two specific things, because it is in the Constitution, and that is how the money must be spent. Since Fair Share has been in place in the last couple of years, we've seen funding for RTAs go increase by over 100% of what they have gotten from the state, as well as the MBTA has seen a significant surge in funding for their operations, as well as the capital, which is all of the, tracks and buses and trains and things like that. Um, uh, it is working. However, we do have some concerns that it's going to start supplanting general fund revenue, and that there'll be paying for things that they used to use general fund dollars for with fair share dollars, and therefore the overall spend will not increase in the way that we would like to see it, and I think what voters voted for. So it's a useful tool. It's working. It's meeting the needs of the moment right now in the short term when it comes to, I think, the way the T is running right now would not have happened without fair share dollars. The elimination of slow zones, the track maintenance, and all of those programs would have not materialized in the time frame that it has. The T still has budget issues moving forward. RTAs are also cash strapped and probably need more investment, but that's probably a different conversation. So, and Betsy, happy to answer your question.
My question was just a quick go through of your priorities as to what are they through any committees? Are the hearings still upcoming? What sort of the current sort of quick status on each of them?
It's been a mix. So there's been a hearing on regional ballot initiatives. There's a hearing on debt-based driving suspension. I testified on a commuter benefits bill that we have that would mandate employers to provide commuter benefits. I think that was the commuter benefits bill I testified on. So it's a mix of some bills have had hearings and some have not.
And have any of the ones that have had hearings been passed through the committees or
Not yet, no.
not yet? So nothing. What you didn't mention is once most bills go through the committee, they then get stuck in Ways and Means. And
True.
Ways and Means Committee is the ultimate sinkhole for state legislation. And the average bill, if it is subject to actually going to pass, you're lucky if it's 6 to 8 years.
Mhm. Yes.
As a
all of those things are true.
as a former state lobbyist.
Yeah.
Brendan, let me know when you want me to talk about
Yeah,
the.
Marty, if you want to share about the bill that you're working on.
Okay. All right. So in addition to the T for MA bill priorities, I've been in touch with Brendan about a bill that I have been working on that I had Representative Jay Livingstone file at the start of the session. And it's House 3731, and it's entitled An Act to Enhance Pedestrian Safety. And this bill is filed for the first time in ever. Earlier iterations of it have been filed for a long time. And what the bill does is it seeks to address a two-part problem for people who slip and fall on publicly owned sidewalks. If you slip and fall on a publicly owned sidewalk right now, and it's a municipal sidewalk, you have to notify the municipality of your personal injury claim in 30 days. You might not even have all your medical bills within 30 days. You might not even know about this 30-day deadline. No matter how severe your injuries, unless you're dead, you've got 30 days. And if you're dead, there's a whole separate thing about your executor has 30 days. And there is a cap on the amount of damages you're entitled to receive of $4,000, a cap that was put in place back in 1965 and has not been raised since. If you fall on a state-owned sidewalk, it's unclear if the state has any liability whatsoever. The law's a little ambiguous, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of, has the state legislature exempted all state sidewalks from any liability? If they do have liability, it's the $4,000 cap again. And so the bill that I filed would eliminate the 30 days and eliminate the $4,000 and replace them with the rules that cover every other kind of public liability. So if you slip and fall inside a school building or a municipal building, you have 2 years to file your claim, and you have a $100,000 cap on your damages. Query whether the $100,000 should be increased. That's a different problem for another day. And so the bill is trying to simply say, treat slip and fall cases on public sidewalks the way we would treat them if they were inside a public building, or if it were any other kind of claim. So if you're in a car accident, you've got the 2 years and the $100,000. And I knew about this issue, but I hadn't really focused on it very much until I slipped and fell on a sidewalk in Boston in October of 2021. I submitted my claim to the city of Boston 6 weeks later. I thought I was unbelievably efficient getting it done in 6 weeks. It was in the middle of COVID. I broke my glasses, so, and I'm nearly blind. So getting it done in 6 weeks, I thought was pretty darn good. It wasn't 30 days, and the city denied my claim. The Boston Globe has covered this extensively through the fine print column that Sean Murphy writes, and there are several other people who have gone public with their cases. And one woman broke her 2 front teeth, has $30,000 worth of dental damages. City of Boston said, nope, we're not responsible. The problem is she couldn't find a lawyer to take the case because of the $5,000 cap. No lawyer is going to take a case on a contingency fee when the maximum recovery is $5,000. And so what this leads to is a lot of people are harmed through defective public ways and can't make any recovery at all. And so they're bearing the costs of our not, as a society, repairing our sidewalks. So that is, it's kind of crazy that this is the law, but it is. And while I was lucky enough, I could afford my $2,000 some worth of damages and hospital bills and the like, because I had good health insurance. Not everybody can do that. And like this poor woman with her $30,000 of dental fees. There's another woman who fell on a sidewalk in the Back Bay, broke her arm, self-employed photographer. She could not work. And again, City of Boston said, thank you, no thank you. We're not going to give you any recovery. And again, no lawyer will take the case. This happens all over the state. I just happen to know the Boston ones. So the bill had a public hearing on June 24th. Thanks to the way the legislature functions, it gives very little public advance notice of when the hearings take place. So I did not testify, although I'm meeting with the committee chair tomorrow. And then I'm going to start lobbying the committee to get the bill reported out. But I welcome any and all support. I am going to do a lot of outreach across the state and try to build support for this. Not surprisingly, I imagine the Mass Municipal Association and the state itself is likely to oppose this. But there's some deep inequities in the current system. So that's my pitch.
Great, Marty. I put the link in the chat to the bill. I think Deb asked for the link.
Thank
So I
you.
put the link to the bill. And I also found your description of it was so good, I was able to find the article about the $30,000 dental bill as well for the Boston Globe article. That's in there as well.
Great, thank you. Yes, there's the woman who fell and broke her arms, also a Globe article. Fox News did a story recently. I got to chase down that person. I'm chasing down various bar associations because there's a lot of lawyers who would like to take some personal injury cases, but they don't. And they understand the gross inequities of this not having been raised since 1965. But also the 30 days. I'm a lawyer. It never dawned on me that there would be a filing period of 30 days. And it's designed to make sure people don't recover.
Right. The 30 days is kind of shocking.
Yeah.
But
How often do you know how many cases there are? Like
I don't.
is there any way to find out? Seems like a really hard thing to figure out.
It's a hard thing to figure out. One of the Globe stories said Boston gets, I think, 25 cases a month. And that's just one city out of the whole state. This is every municipality has these rules and the state itself. So I have no idea how many claims are made against the state. I don't even quite know how I would figure that out, short of a public records request.
Right.
And I'd have to there's a separate law covering DCR. And then there's one covering regular state roads, and then there's one covering all the municipal roads and sidewalks. I mean, the bizarre thing is if I fell inside a school building or a government building, I don't have these rules. It's just if the sidewalk is outside.
Right.
Like if I fall on an outdoor surface, there's one set of rules. If I fall on an indoor surface, there's a different set of rules.
Right.
This isn't even related to snow and ice. That's a whole other body of law that I'm not even getting near. This is a clean, clear, non-icy, non-snowy day sidewalk. Thank you for the opportunity to tell you about it. I'm generating testimony to the committee. If the House follows the usual 60-day rule, it will have to take action on the bill by mid-August. If it gets a 30-day extension, then it's got to take action on it by mid-September. So under the new rules, there's now a sense of urgency. The committees have to move a lot more quickly than they used to.
Great.
Any questions or anything? Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about this.
Absolutely. And yeah, the link, if people want to know more about that bill, the link in the chat is there so you can see the text of the bill.
And I'm going to put my email address in there. So anybody who wants to know more can email me, or if you have further questions, that's my email address that I just put in the chat. So welcome any and all thoughts. I'm a layperson writing this bill, trying to make sense of it all, which is why I'm trying to reach out to a lot of lawyers for some help.
Fantastic. Two bills that Walk Massachusetts has testified on over the last month. One is there was a hearing for road safety camera bill. Walk Massachusetts has been in support of road safety cameras for a number of years now. It's not legal and it's not illegal in Massachusetts. There's just no process to allow billing people for fines. So there are no cameras in the state right now. So this would let municipalities opt into road safety cameras. I actually testified alongside Pete for this one. And we also, Galen Mook from Mass Bike and Emily Stein from Safe Roads Alliance also testified. It sounded very positive in the Joint Transportation Committee. So it has moved through this committee in previous sessions. So we feel pretty good about this one. And then the other bill testified on was one about legalizing autonomous vehicles here in Massachusetts. This is just a bad bill. We don't at Walk Massachusetts, we don't currently have a position on autonomous vehicles, but this bill removes any ability for the state to regulate it. It's completely written by the industry. And so we testified alongside T4Mass and Conservation Law Foundation about the concerns and things that the Joint Committee should be thinking about when it comes to regulating automated vehicles, autonomous vehicles. So, yeah, those are the two things that we've testified for lately. We're also in one of those I mentioned because we heard other things that were being talked about during that session. You know, we're also in support of a expanded truck safety requirements. Senator Brownsberger had filed a bill last session that got passed around side guards and increasing safety for people walking and biking around large vehicles. This tries to do away with some of the exceptions that were granted in the actual implementation of the previous bill. So that would be S2343 for that additional file by Senator Brownsberger around truck safety. But I will get off my soapbox of the different bills that we're supporting. But if there are other bills that people have that they want to talk about, Pete, you.
Yeah, I just it's not a bill per se, but it is in process. So last session, the legislature passed two bills, one for automated camera enforcement for bus lanes, as well, and then another one for school buses. right? So these are two bills that would allow, or it's two laws now that would allow for bus mounted and stationary cameras at bus stops to enforce people parking in bus stops or driving or parked in bus lanes. So the T is currently crafting regulations on the bus lanes and bus stops bill or law, and they are looking for a board vote for the MBTA board in September, hopefully for to rolling out implementation later this year. I think this is really important for people, particularly with disabilities, who are at bus stops and they have to like walk out into traffic to get onto the bus, which is super dangerous. And then the school bus bill is that's sort of municipality by municipality, and they have to issue their own RFPs. But Peabody and Salem both did pilot programs last year, and I think Peabody found that they had over 4,000 violations of people driving around school buses when they were either picking up or dropping off children. This would allow for camera enforcements for those things to catch those scofflaws, because it's very, very dangerous. I think a kid was hit in Brockton and in Haverhill the last couple of years. It's probably the most inconsiderate and stupid thing that you can do as a driver. And actually, a woman was charged in Plymouth just like in the last 6 months because she was caught on a Ring video camera driving through someone's U-shaped driveway to get around the bus and almost hitting a child who was walking out of the house to get on the bus. So those are in process. Those are positive developments of what the legislature has done, and hopefully we can get on board with the broader speed and red light camera enforcement bills as
So
well.
does Salem and Peabody have model language that one could just bring to a city council?
I don't know, because it's not quite clear if it has to be approved by the city council or the school committee, right?
Okay,
And and then the municipality would have to issue the RFP through the public procurement process. I do have a contact up there in Salem in the mayor's office, and I could reach out for you, Betsy. I know some of the actual folks who work for the camera companies as well, if that's also helpful. And because they're obviously out there to make money and sell their product. So they're looking to meet with local officials as well to make the pitch
Well-
to them about safety.
well, and then, I mean, a lot of communities, including Springfield, uses First Student, which is the big contract company. So, I mean, yeah, no, if there's any help in terms of how do we start that process? Do we
Yeah,
go
it's my
school
understanding
committee? Do we go? Yeah, maybe.
it's my understanding that the municipality would have to negotiate whatever their contract is with their
Okay.
vendor as well if they don't own the buses.
Okay.
If
yeah.
that makes
I'll reach out
sense.
to my school committee member and find out what he knows. Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be great. Because
Okay.
it's a real problem here in Springfield.
Yeah, Betsy,
Yeah.
I dropped a link in the chat that it's like a press release from Salem Public Schools from January 2025, like right after the governor signed the bill, and it like references some of their data from their pilot program. Great. Any other questions? Looks like Rachel just dropped the commuter benefits bill language in the chat as well. Great.
I can put our emails in the chat too, if anyone has any further questions.
Fantastic. And Rachel and Pete, if it's okay, like we could also share the slides on our website afterwards alongside the recording in case people want to go back and look at any of the stuff.
Yeah, we can add more links in there too, Brendan, before you share,
Okay.
and clean them up a little bit.
Great. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you both for presenting, and thanks everyone else who joined today. Really appreciate you all being here.
Brendan, do you want to stay and just tell me what the meeting I missed was?
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Thank
All
you,
right.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Everybody.
Bye.